Hey everyone, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Imagine the terror of a knock on the door, knowing it could mean losing absolutely everything you own,
Everything.
just because you fell maybe a little behind on rent.
For so many families in America, this isn't, hypothetical. It's real. It's a monthly fear.
It really is. And today's deep dive, it actually comes as a special request from our friend Celestial Circle Dance over on YouTube.
Ah, fantastic. Shout out to Celestial Circle Dance.
Yeah, and this one, it tackles a really powerful, often kind of unseen issue in our society.
It definitely does. We're stepping into, well, the world of social science, I guess, and investigative reporting.
Definitely investigative reporting.
Yeah.
With Matthew Desmond's really groundbreaking work, Evicted, Poverty and Profit in the American City.
A truly eye-opening book.
Absolutely. So if this kind of in-depth exploration, the kind that really makes you think about the world, if that sparks your curiosity, please do hit that like button.
And subscribe. It helps us keep doing these deep dives.
It really does. Now, Evicted. We've put a link in the description below. It isn't just data or statistics.
No, not at all. It's incredibly immersive. It follows the lives of 8 different families in Milwaukee.
Right. Families grappling with eviction. And it also looks at 2 landlords who are, navigating the complexities of renting to the poor.
It's raw, very unflinching. It really shows how eviction isn't just like something that happens because you're poor.
Exactly. It argues eviction is a major driver of poverty, not just a consequence.
That's the key shift in perspective.
Yeah. We're going to unpack some of the really surprising, sometimes deeply moving stories from the book.
And show those connections, right, between housing, poverty, opportunity, things maybe people haven't quite connected in the same way before.
That's the goal. Our mission today really is to pull out the crucial insights from Evicted. Insights that might just reshape how you understand poverty in America.
Moving beyond maybe the common assumptions.
Exactly. And really revealing the powerful role housing plays.
Yeah.
Especially for the most vulnerable people.
Yeah, what's so compelling about Evicted right from the start is how it just throws you into the daily struggle.
Instantly.
You take Arlene, for instance. She's a mom, low-income neighborhood in Milwaukee. Her total welfare income, $628 a month.
Okay.
Now, the cheapest apartment she could find, a 2-bedroom that would actually take her and her kids, $550 a month.
Wow. So wait, 550 from 628. That leaves
$78.
$78 for everything else.
For everything else. Food, clothes, bus fare, diapers, and critically, utilities, heat, electricity.
That's not a margin, that's a cliff edge. It just shows how incredibly thin things are.
Razor thin. And it's not just the rent figure itself, as the book points out.
Right, you mentioned utilities. Those costs have gone up like crazy too, haven't they?
Dramatically. Since the year 2000, fuel and utility costs jumped over 50%.
50%. So you can just picture Arlene constantly trying to juggle, pay the rent, or keep the lights on.
Especially with those Milwaukee winters coming, it's this constant high-stress balancing act.
Yeah, a tightrope walk where one slip means, well, potentially disaster.
Exactly. And it forces these impossible choices. Pay rent, risk getting the heat shut off. Or pay the utility bill and fall behind on rent, getting closer to eviction.
There's no winning move there.
None. The book even talks about people doing desperate things just to get basic utilities back on.
Which really highlights how fundamental shelter and basic services are. You can't have stability without them.
And how tied they are to this whole issue of poverty. Which leads us to Desmond's central argument, doesn't it?
It really does. We talk a lot about poverty in terms of jobs, right? Or welfare programs, maybe incarceration rates.
All important factors, absolutely.
For sure. But Desmond says, hang on, we've kind of overlooked something huge and foundational. Housing.
He argues quite strongly that we haven't really grasped how housing instability, especially eviction, actively creates poverty. It's not just a symptom.
That's such a crucial distinction he makes, yeah. He's not saying jobs don't matter.
Not at all. But he's asking us to re-examine where we put our focus. He points out, look, not everyone in poor communities deals with the justice system or even social services directly, but pretty much all of them have a landlord.
That relationship, tenant and landlord, that's universal in that context.
Exactly. And he uses that relationship as a critical lens, a way to understand how poverty gets sustained, how it's perpetuated day to day.
And Evicted just brings that to life with these incredibly personal stories. You see families like Doreen's just constantly moving, forced into worse and worse places because they can't keep up with rent.
And the instability, it just ripples through everything, doesn't it?
Everything. Kids' schooling gets messed up. Holding down a job becomes nearly impossible.
Health suffers, mental and physical. It's a cascade effect.
It really is. And then there's the eviction record itself.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge piece of it. The book shows how that record can be like a brand.
How so?
Well, landlords use these databases, right, to screen tenants. And just having an eviction filed against you, even if you weren't ultimately kicked out.
Even just the filing.
Often, yes. It makes it incredibly difficult to find decent housing later. Karen, one of the landlords in the book, she puts it bluntly.
What does she say?
Something like, if they have an eviction, what makes you think they're going to pay you?
Wow. So it creates this cycle. You get evicted, maybe unfairly, maybe not.
And suddenly you're locked out of the market or pushed into even worse options. It makes it so much harder to get back on your feet.
So the system meant to resolve disputes actually ends up trapping people.
That's a key insight, definitely. It can inadvertently perpetuate instability.
It feels almost designed to keep people down sometimes. And to be fair, Desmond shows the landlord side too, right? Shireen and Tobin.
Yes, he does. He's careful to show their perspective. They're operating in the same tough market, trying to make a living.
But their decisions, even if they make business sense to them,
have these massive, life-altering consequences for their tenants.
Yeah. What's really insightful is how he portrays that whole landlord-tenant dynamic.
Yeah.
It's often so fraught.
You see Sharina, for example. She's dealing with real issues. Late rent, property damage, tenants leaving unexpectedly.
Sure, those are real business challenges.
Absolutely. And sometimes she tries to help, shows empathy. But at the end of the day, the economic pressure, the legal system, it often pushes her towards eviction.
He also points out the tight margins they operate on sometimes,
Yeah.
right, in these low-income areas.
Yeah, a few missed payments can hurt the landlord's bottom line significantly, too. It's tough on both sides in different ways.
And then you have Tobin, the mobile home park owner. He seems different.
Much more direct, aggressive even sometimes in his rent collection methods.
Yeah, the book describes him relentlessly chasing tenants for rent, even calling their jobs.
It paints a really stark picture of the power imbalance.
Totally unequal. The tenants are often just desperate, very few options, little power when facing eviction or bad living conditions.
And the legal system. Desmond's portrayal of eviction court is just sobering.
How so?
Well, he describes these scenes. Landlords usually have lawyers, looking professional.
Okay.
Tenants often show up alone, confused, overwhelmed by the legal jargon, the process.
Right.
And the court often just focuses on one thing. Was the rent paid? Yes or no?
Not why it wasn't paid, or the conditions they were living in.
Often no. There's this moment in the book, a court commissioner says to a tenant trying to explain she had no electricity for a month.
What does he say?
He basically dismisses it.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily a fact we need to work out today.
Oof. Chilling. That just sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The system focusing on the transaction, ignoring the human suffering.
Exactly. It shows how the system can be blind to the reality on the ground.
And the consequences of that eviction, when it happens, the book details them meticulously. They're catastrophic.
Absolutely. You don't just lose your home, you often lose your possession.
Your job, because of the disruption.
Your community ties, your kids' school stability, everything gets thrown into chaos.
And it leads to more hardship, higher rates of homelessness, terrible impacts on health.
Physical and mental health, yeah. It's a downward spiral.
So, connecting this back to the bigger picture, Desmond did a lot of research beyond these stories, right? The Milwaukee area renter study.
He did, and his findings were stark. Eviction rates in Milwaukee were incredibly high.
And was Milwaukee unique?
No, that's the point. He found the rates were comparable to other big cities. This isn't just a Milwaukee problem.
It's a national crisis.
Pretty much. And the consequences he documents, the instability, the deprivation, they fuel that cycle of poverty. They make it incredibly hard for families to ever get ahead.
It paints a really, really sobering picture. Evicted forces you to see that having a stable home isn't just about personal responsibility.
No, it's deeply tangled up with systemic issues. Policy failures.
Like the lack of affordable housing?
Definitely. And inadequate legal protections for tenants, the way the whole system is set up. It all plays a part in this crisis.
Which brings up that fundamental question you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, what does it mean to live in a society that promises opportunity, well-being for everyone?
Desmond connected right back to the Declaration of Independence, doesn't he? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
He does. He argues that a stable home is essential for all of those things.
How can you pursue happiness if you're constantly worried about losing your home?
Exactly. Without that foundation, achieving security, opportunity, well-being, it becomes almost impossible.
Okay, so if we boil it down, what are the main takeaways here? What does Desmond want us to understand?
I think the biggest thing is, if we're serious about tackling poverty, we have to rethink housing, fundamentally.
It can't just be about income or jobs.
Right.
We need to ensure people have safe, stable, genuinely affordable places to live.
Right. And the book does touch on potential solutions, doesn't it? Policy ideas.
Yeah, like expanding housing voucher programs, making them work better.
He talks about making them available to everyone who qualifies, which isn't the case now, and preventing landlords from just jacking up rents because someone has a voucher.
That makes sense. And also providing legal help for tenants in housing court.
Yeah, a universal right to counsel like you have in criminal cases, because right now that power imbalance in court is huge.
Landlords have lawyers, tenants usually don't.
Exactly. And he points out other developed countries often have stronger housing policies. These aren't like radical, untested ideas.
They're things that could actually make a difference.
Potentially, yes.
So ultimately, Evicted just leaves you with this really profound, maybe uncomfortable understanding.
Uncomfortable is a good word for it.
Just how absolutely central housing is, and how eviction acts like this major barrier keeping people trapped.
It really pushes you past simplistic ideas about, people just needing to try harder.
Yeah, it forces you to look at the bigger structures, the policies, the societal choices that let this happen.
And that brings us to the ethical side, right? If housing is so basic, so essential,
What's our responsibility as a society?
do we have a moral obligation to make sure everyone has a roof over their head? The stories in the book, they're so human, so heartbreaking. They really force you to wrestle with that.
It's hard not to. Seeing families just constantly churn through this cycle of displacement and hardship.
Yeah.
So let's leave our listeners with this thought. Consider this. If a stable home is so fundamental to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, like the founders declared, what does it say about our society today when eviction is just routine? When it happens so often, casting families onto this path of deeper hardship?
That's a powerful question.
The stories, the insights from Evicted, they really challenge us to think hard about that, what
Yeah.
it means for our communities.
And maybe ask, what responsibilities do we have individually, collectively, to actually address this systemic issue?
Something to definitely think about.